Hello, what's good? In this video, I'll be talking about rendering, sketches, and then also a little bit about art styles and the complicatedness about that. So in this sketch, I'm going to be using a Staedtler pencil. I believe it is 3B, a Papermate pen, and then some Ohuhu markers just to add some color in there. And if you're wondering why I'm using a Papermate pen instead of Micron, you might notice there that my Microns tend to smudge with these Ohuhus. So I just really like the cheaper one, this Papermate that I just got from like CVS for a couple cents. So if you're in need of one, I highly recommend these. And the Ohuhus come with a nice chisel tip on one side, and then also on the other side, a nice little inking tip. So yeah, while you're watching, by the way, I highly encourage you to take out a sketchbook and draw with me. In this video, I'll be talking about inking and all that jazz. So I encourage you to also take out an inking pen or something of the sort to, make this happen. So yeah, let's talk about rendering sketches. So the way that I tend to operate is that all of my paintings and everything that I make essentially starts with a sketch. It starts with me in my sketchbook drawing or writing down an idea, just whatever comes to my mind. And I have to think about, what am I going to do with my time? How am I going to use my time to render these out and to develop them, and how far do I want to go? Many times they stay as sketches, and then they eventually get transferred into an oil painting or to paintings in general, using digital means, aka my iPad, and just putting them on a canvas. But other times they just stay as sketches, and I either ink them or just add a little bit to them. Nothing too fancy like how I'm doing in this sketch. And that's fine. That's fine to just have a sketch, because I think one of the cool things is that you could just look back at your old sketches and your old ideas and then get inspired by them and maybe want to, develop them even more. But I want to talk about how that, is not always good. Just always sketching and not, developing them and rendering them. I think sometimes only sketching in your sketchbook and not developing those, I'm going to keep saying sketches, those drawings, those ideas, could sometimes hinder you. Sometimes us as artists, we draw a lot, right? I always have my sketchbook. I'm always drawing. If you know me, you know my videos. But like many other skills, you have to develop all forms of that skill. You can't just, stick to one medium for the rest of your life and become a one-trick pony, these days at least. Maybe if you develop that one style and you're able to repeat it a lot, you could do that. But in the beginning, especially when you're trying to, become better at drawing, at sketching and making art, you want to try a lot of new things. You want to try a lot of different things. And just keeping these ideas in your little booklet isn't really going to help you develop those skills. So what I recommend is that you take the time to select some of your favorites, maybe once a month, maybe every so often, and make it into a bigger piece, or maybe just add some color to your sketchbook. For example, I'm constantly drawing my character here on the left, Snacks. He's just a purple guy who I'm always drawing in like different positions, doing different things. And here you could see me just drawing this idea out that I just had of him dancing. I think it's just funny that I've always had this idea of him being, one of those Dancing with the Stars people. And that's just been on the back of my mind, but I wanted to draw it out. I wanted to, flesh it out. So you could see me starting by doing, my circle for the head, drawing some guiding lines to maybe show what the body position is going to look like, and then eventually filling that in. And, I could very easily stop right when, everything looks quote unquote good, right? When all the outlines are pretty much done. But I don't decide to do that. I decided to do something called inking, which is when you use an ink pen, right? India ink or any sort of black ink or other color ink, to just, really define those lines. And this is one of the most tricky processes, because something about sketching and something about, the looseness of those lines being able to be erased and being kind of light is really nice. But taking that extra step and inking your pieces, adds that extra value and helps you further render those ideas. If you've ever painted like a full acrylic painting, or in my case, murals, if you've ever painted a mural, you know how difficult it is when you're on the wall or at the painting to sort of come up with something. When you're just trying to figure out what colors to put where, what works where, it's difficult. And sometimes I've just taken sketches like this, how it looks at this point, and just thrown it on a canvas and just hoped for the best. But that's not the most efficient thing to do. You know, you want to be able to really imagine what your piece is going to look like before you even start your bigger piece. Unless your art form, you know, specifically calls for you to be imaginative on the canvas itself. But, you know, generally people that you know, make bigger paintings think about everything beforehand. So that's just what I'm doing here. I came up with this idea, right? Very loose sketch. I could have ended it right here, but then I decided to ink it. I wanted to really define those lines and show like where the body parts are, how they're moving, you know, show the looseness of and the fluidity of the motion that they're doing through the line work that I'm creating. And then the color just further complements that, you know, adds texture, adds emotion, and all that jazz. But, you know, we'll get to that eventually. But for now, let's talk about art styles. This is something that I've definitely struggled with, so, you know, I don't have all the answers. But yeah, I started making art in 2020, and this concept of art styles really didn't make sense to me, because I just thought, you know, in school, you are painting something that you're told to paint, and that's what you're going to do. So like having this freedom to paint whatever you want, draw whatever you want on your own time is kind of difficult, right? Especially if you're trying to become an artist who sells your work. You have to really come up with something that's, you know, both people are going to want to buy to put in their homes, or that, you know, maybe some other audience will want. When I started making art, I started doing a lot of portraiture and realism, because I thought the more impressive a piece was, the more likely someone will buy it, right? And someone will want it. I'm quickly learning that, you know, that isn't necessarily what people want. I think part of that is true, right? Because some people don't really want, you know, scary things, or some people really just don't like faces kind of looking at them in their rooms. I don't know. People are weird. I'm weird. It's fine. But yeah, it's kind of deciding what's a good balance between what you want to draw and what people want in their places. So when I started drawing a lot of realism, but I sort of moved away from that pretty slowly and started drawing, you know, a lot of character stuff. And when I started doing this, I wanted to make some things that were funny. And they eventually turned kid-centered, because, as in like stuff for kids, just because of the quality of the works that I was making was very cartoonish, and they felt funny. And even though they had some, you know, adult themes in terms of like, you know, global warming and other political things, right? They're still, you know, very outwardly kid themes. And I've realized that this sort of design and this style that I've developed, in terms of like coloring vibrantly the Snacks character, doesn't really work for paintings that people want to buy. It might work for some people, but, you know, not for the majority. So I've sort of kept this style, and I specifically use it for child spaces whenever I paint a mural in like a school or something like that. And I'm sort of moving away from this too, because it is very, you know, childish, and I sort of keep it for myself, because I just love doing this style of art. But now I'm sort of, you know, maturing as an artist and wanting to develop things that, you know, may really appear in a gallery setting or may appear in someone's homes. And, you know, thinking a lot about that for the past, you know, couple months. And I'm preparing for a big, it's not a solo show, but it's a group show. But essentially my work is going to be my own work in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts. And I basically have free range to develop whatever I want on these large canvases that this gallery provided with me. So for the show, I have spoken a lot about sort of developing the style and capturing the essence of New York through street photography, and eventually through oil paintings, and, you know, criticizing the way museums work and the way that we perceive art in general. I'm going to put a picture of a painting on the screen that sort of sparked this idea, and you could see the beginnings of that, right? This started off as a sketch, by the way, but you could see the beginnings of this idea of, you know, criticizing museums and drawing this character who's supposed to embody hip-hop and drawing graffiti on this painting that, you know, is supposed to be in a space that is a museum. So yeah, thinking a lot about this idea, I think that both capturing people, real pictures of people, and then also urban landscapes will help me develop this plan. So now that I have the content down, right? Like if I'm drawing like something in this cartoony style, let's say I just think about, okay, Snacks is going to be bringing a shopping cart down the road, right? Content is pretty easy for me. But then paint quality. paint application techniques, color, the choice of medium. These are all so difficult to think about for me. How do you render this? Which brings us back to the first point. How do you render this to the point where it perfectly, represents your original idea, but then also exceeds that original concept and pushes it to be something bigger than what it is? And this is a really broad topic. I've spent many hours sketching, writing down notes, looking at other people's arts. So I'm currently in the process of, trying different art styles to paint some studies of some pictures that I've taken to eventually paint on these big pieces. Because, it's a lot of pressure, because the biggest piece is 4 foot by 4 foot, which is, massive. There's a lot of pressure, so I don't want to mess this up. So I'm doing a lot of studies. But yeah, I've been looking at artists such as Maria Guimarães. I think she's a Portuguese or Brazilian artist. I've been looking at Felipe Ortiz, and I've been looking at Conrado Lopez, to name a few. And this idea of portraiture and how it's portrayed in very different ways, changing up the color, changing up the quality of the photos that you're taking in terms of reference photo, and then also physical paint quality. If you've seen my previous video about copying a Kipto piece, one thing that I noticed about his pieces was that he really adds a lot of texture, and there's like this really nice rawness to his pieces that I just love. So I really want to capture that. Because I have practiced that in the past, and I think it's always coming out successful. And I'm learning that, people tend to gravitate towards that rawness, because I will admit that a lot of these paintings of Snacks, of this purple character that I tend to draw, do come out very perfect, right? Whenever I fill them in, they're very flat colors. The colors are very, distinct. It's like, this is purple, this is blue. And if you look at a lot of my past works, that's what it's been. But now I'm realizing that, people like to see a little bit of color variation and a little bit of like random bounce lights and some texture when you're adding things, right? They don't want perfectness. This is like for animation studios, right? Where if you're a Disney artist, you have to perfectly draw the Disney way and the Pixar way and whatnot. Because any sort of difference people are going to notice, and it's going to look bad. So I'm straying away from that because I want to be a painter. I want to be a gallery artist. So, by the way, I'm saying all this as some tips that I think people can take from and potentially use in their own work. And when they're thinking about, when you are thinking about developing your own work of art or your own series to consider. And same thing with my, I will say, same thing with my pet portraits. They've been very specific to the reference photos because I'm so afraid of messing it up. But I think now on I'm gonna start, adding some colors, some weird colors, some wacky designs, hair, whatnot, to liven them up, make them fun, make them more unique. I am tired of just copying the photo bar for bar, and not making it my own. So going back to this piece, right? I've sort of rambled a little bit about finding your own style. But this piece, you could see a little bit of that. I'm adding random lines in some places, not being so precise. But I'm still rendering this idea, right? The idea is still there. It's the Snacks kneeling down with his arm behind him, holding this bear in a dress. And it's this very fun, possibly they're dancing salsa or something like that, scene. And it comes through like that, right? And it's a very fun piece, and I'm happy that, instead of just drawing this out and just sketching it and leaving it as it is, I decided to ink it and color it. And I think that, developing these pieces is so important. I've probably said this before, but I'm going to repeat it again. It's so important to develop these pieces and, just think about them a little bit longer. Because your ideas as an artist are worth, thinking about and figuring out and not just keeping them as scribbles. You're actually thinking more about the process and thinking about how you would potentially paint this, and you're problem solving a lot. You're problem solving issues with line quality, you're problem solving color issues. You're doing a lot of that, whether you think about it or not directly, right? Like in how I'm doing these lines, maybe in this variation, like I didn't like how I drew the toes or like the dress. And in future ones, I'm going to think about that a little bit more, right? I'm going to think about how the folds fall on his shoulders and his elbows a little bit more, right? And I wouldn't have reached that point if I didn't ink this or put some color down or, do anything else to it, right? So yeah, that's just a bunch of thoughts that I'm doing. You know, stay tuned for these future painting projects. I'm very excited to do these large paintings. I think I'm gonna really grind these out and have a really nice product for you guys, and a fun video whenever that comes out. But yeah, I would still encourage you, if you do have this sort of quote unquote secret art form that you love doing on your own, you know, don't stop doing that. I never stop drawing snacks, right? Even though I've come to the point where these probably won't sell in a gallery. Maybe eventually if I make them super unique and raw and maybe funny or caustic or something like that. But I don't think it's time for that now. I want to do a lot of portraiture. So yeah, I hope this video encouraged you to, you know, continue to sketch, continue to draw, and continue to render out your sketches instead of just keeping them as pencil sketches, as graphite sketches. So yeah, I appreciate you. Let me know in the comments if you've reached this far in the video. And yeah,